Hello, Adam. You're early.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can very well. Yes. You may not be able to recognize me today because I'm drinking tea and not coffee. So have you followed this kind of success of? Hang on a second. Yeah, the success of what we're doing with ACM. It's kind of interesting.
Yep.
And it seems to be relatively official now, so we don't have to hide away. We can mention the name. Even the external production company, they said, this is great. They want to support it.
Ah, nice.
That's exciting. Exciting indeed. Hello, Raphael. I am not going to tell you the temperature here in London. I know you're on the wrong side of the world right now. I'm not going to mention that it's 23 degrees outside. Be quiet about that. Adam, are those your kids?
Yep.
Will we ever get to meet them?
Maybe in person.
Maybe in person. Okay. Well, that sounds.
Or in person. No, but I'm not. I'm a bit reluctant to have them on the web at early age or uploaded.
We can pause recording if you want to have them say hello, but it's not important at all.
No, I don't want to get them in here.
Okay.
Then disaster will happen.
Yeah.
They're going out for a walk, so it's perfect. So we shouldn't interfere with that.
Yeah, yes. Mark Anderson is on his way. He's just making coffee, and I have my tea, so it's so weird. It's like a personality change. Anyway.
I also have my tea here, my little tea kettle.
Yeah, you're a proper tea person, though. It was so strange. We had someone here do a drone of the garden this morning, a drone video and drone pictures. And he didn't want coffee, he wanted tea, and I felt so offended. But then when I made the tea, it smelled quite nice. So yeah, today is a tea day. Cheers, Mr. Coffee Anderson.
Hey, Mark.
That's actually quite funny when you hold it up properly. That's a good filter, Mark. What filter is that you're using? Coffee filter. Anyway. So let me just see here. Yeah, I'm going to pause recording for a little bit just to go through some housekeeping, actually. So housekeeping done. And I've seen the emails. Some of you have also between Mark and Adam on names. It's really strange that issue has not been solved. But as Mark pointed out in his last emails, different cultures have such different naming conventions. So it is an issue, but I think that we need to solve it for our own purposes.
Absolutely. And I thought the thing, I put that in the sense that I know the temptation is to say, this is not my problem, and let's just lowball the answer, which is what we all do. And I'm thinking, no, if we're going to get this right for a change, so Adam's right, what we probably need to think of a canonical UID. And actually, if it's done, if we get it right, it can be fixed. So if it transpires that the master name that we're attaching to the UID is wrong, actually that can be fixed down the line. And now we're in a digital space, it should be self-solving. Whereas in the print age, if I printed the wrong name, well, yeah, it was already printed. Now we can get around that. And I would just say a very nice thing for Adam, that I posted on it's a closed group that the Web Science group at Southampton have on Facebook. One of the things I didn't expect when I posted, so I said, I really want to try this out with my data. And I thought, well, fab. And you've made it so nice and reusable that, someone can have a go at that. So chapeau, and thank you very much, because it may be something you won't directly see, but I just wanted to pass that back to you.
And that is an unthankful working with the data for years, like you do, and then I come along with this perfect data, working with it and visualizing it, and people like the visualization, and they don't really understand the really hard work is in cleaning things up so you can use them. It takes me a few days to do the visualizations, while it has taken you months of active work, or maybe or
But we
actually.
can get there. I mean, the thing is, a lot of the complexities in the past, collecting data for something was never done with this in time. My inspiration to do this, to do what seems like a completely pointless task, is really to get it to the point where I can hold it up in front of people who keep saying, well, what's the point? And say, well, you know, we can do all this stuff. I mean, that's exciting. That's actually why the visualization work you're doing is at this stage far more important than the data set, because sad to say, it's the visualization which will make people realize just how much has been left on the cutting room.
People never see the struggles behind the stage, huh, Mark?
Yeah, but I really hope that you know, like so next year Hypertext and Web Science are together, and Wendy's quite excited. It's going to be in Barcelona, so hopefully people will be able to go to it. And you know, she said, oh yeah, maybe we might do visual meta. And the two things I'd like to,
which is shocking,
would also like to, yeah, I'd like to get her to do is that one is to do a much richer proceedings, because we're not constrained by print costs. As far as I know, no one I don't know if you can even get the printed copy of ACM proceedings. So why on earth are we using out-of-date self-imposed limits? When I was reminded going to the website conference, and this was relayed back by several colleagues, that we got far more as people in the area out of the tutorials, keynotes, workshops than we did out of the papers. Not that there's anything wrong with the scholarship in the papers, but the nature of them is they're quite arcane and they don't have immediate relevance. So the fact that we're just publishing the citation part, which is fine for academic kudos, and it's a very necessary part of building the wall of knowledge, but so much is being thrown on the ground. And that the other thing I want to get people to do is to find a way that whether we do it in a PDF or separate to it, we should now be making it a minimum bar that you need to create a clean, machine readable copy of texts. So all the headings, footings, all soft hyphenation, all that stuff that we need on the screen should never go into it. I've been reading papers just recently where people are using AI to figure OCR errors on documents digitally produced. So I'm thinking, guys, we got this all wrong. This is not where people should be spending their intellectual time.
That's like that company that made a browser, but the browser is on the cloud because Google Chrome is a memory hog. Like that's not how you solve the problem. We have failed as an internet and the web.
Yeah.
By the way, Jerry, please.
Just want to say the data set is marvelous. Okay. I had tremendous fun, you know, sort of just scrolling around and seeing all the connections and hunting down a few really great references. My only complaint is that at that point, I found the paper, I want to be able to open it up, PDF, and annotate it. Well, please sort that out, because putting all this behind paywall is nonsense. I'm out of academia. I mean, but I worked on a paper, I paid $75 or pound, I can't remember, for a month, for 2 months, just to have access to the papers. I mean, that's ridiculous. And even if you say, okay, only for only for annotating here or whatever, I think that would make sense. It just basically renders 20 years, I don't know how long it's been going on, 30 years of scholarship, basically moribund.
Yes. Jerry, you're in Hungary now, right?
Yes.
My mother is in the kitchen. Can I introduce you guys? Because she's been interrupted by this meeting so many times. It'd be nice if she knows who you are. Okay. I'll take her out. I'll take you out to her.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, that sounds like a house painting sketch from that De Niro movie.
Hi, will you say hi? So this is my mother, everyone.
Hello.
Starting at the top of my screen, this is Adam. He's in Sweden.
Hello.
Rafael in Brazil, Jerry in Hungary, and Mark Anderson in Southampton.
Oh my gosh,
And we met at Fred's
Pleased to meet
birthday.
you.
Yeah, this one you know,
Yes.
Mark, you know.
Yeah, I met you before.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're interrupting Grandma's important work cutting flowers. But
Yes.
since
Yeah.
I've interrupted her so many times to have the meeting, I thought she should meet you guys.
Nice to meet you.
Well, very nice. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
I'm sorry. I think the cat is shouting for me, and my son can come in at any minute. It could be half an hour. I don't know. Just wanted you to know. Just a second.
Good. Yeah, we should really look at the naming thing. And, you know, the thing we have discussed, and I think we agreed that if someone wants to add weird stuff to Visual Meta, that's fine. They just have to explain how it's done. So I have a feeling that we can do, something along the lines of normal BibTeX style, and then some kind of markers. And in there, it's really, really clear. I don't care what markers. That's something probably for Adam to decide, because he is the one who deals with the parsing. And, you know, but just say after that saying, this is how it's done, right? Sorry, what I mean, I'm saying something very obvious that I know we all agree on, but what I'm suggesting is that we also say what kind of a name it is. So if it's in Chinese characters or Arabic or Western, that is actually explicitly stated. So we don't have to deal with, because they may have very different parsings in the future. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
What was the question?
Jerry.
No, what was the question? I missed the question. So
Mark will paraphrase, so to get it from a different perspective.
Okay, so the data set which you've seen, Adam has been, you know, digging down into putting further affordances into his visualizations, and found that actually just using the last name of the author wasn't really working. And of course, that falls us into this whole world of, you know, our preconceptions about what names are. And in fact, that probably locally, contextually, within any locale, any country, they're reasonably uncomplex. Once you begin to put your net wider, and indeed you work across different scripts, cultures, whatever, it gets insanely complicated. So Adam rightly pointed out, we probably need to, what we really need is a GUID for people, which makes a lot of sense. I'm being careful at this point in not crystallizing my data set too much, because it's in a flexible tool in Tinderbox, which is not big enough to build a really large data set. And I'm cautious. What I don't want to do is leave too many of my footprints of where I put pragmatic things into the thing. And at the moment, I'm trying to hold on to as much provenance as I can. But it's absolutely right. I've got exactly the same problem with keywords. So in the keywords for the data set, which are not in the versions you'll have seen, it's in my master set at the moment, there are, I don't know, 4,000 keywords or something, half of which have a single use only, which is one problem. But well, that's mine. I mean, at least there is only one. But after I've, say, taken all the different case renditions of hypertext singular and plural and maybe smushed it together with hypermedia, because is there really a difference? It's still useful to know what the original use case was. So we're back in the same terrain of needing a GUID. So you can sort of say this keyword actually contains these sub keywords, and they separately need to link back, because if you're trying to do a different sort of analysis, it might be important to know what the person actually said. You know, if you're doing a close reading of something, as opposed to someone who just wants to do a sort of machine type thing, you know, reach into a bucket of half the world's information and say, just give me back everything that matches X. So I think it's something to be done with care, especially as I'm, you know, this is not my area of expertise. I also don't want to rush into just pushing it into the more structured area of technical sort of linked data and things, because I'm very conscious from my own recent studies that the difficult part of that is the more structured it gets, the fewer humans there are in the room who can actually meaningfully interact with it. And that doesn't mean the structure is not necessary, but what we need a level at which it's still accessible on a more basic level, or just to do the kind of thing Adam's been doing without having to have very complex frameworks to interact with it. That gives us a much richer outcome. But at the moment, I feel one of the things I've seen recently is people are trying to compress those two together. and not necessarily to good effect. So what we end up is very structured systems that don't fully understand the messy things we've got. And ironically, at the moment, my hand-curated thing is managing to cope vaguely with some of that messiness. And I'm keen to preserve the messiness as long as I can, because I think it's a really interesting learning area for us all. And I think we can probably, with care, also ride both horses by sort of not rushing to do the cross mapping. Jury, you may have a different view, because I know you have a much stronger background in.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm a one-trick pony. I've been working on this for 15 years. This sort of maximal scope solution to these problems. So as far as I'm concerned, this is what I done with Mindrive based on Fission, which is based on IPFS. And basically, this is very much the same thing that the underlay people, you know, the Dennis Hilly's crowd, you know, who Freebase, you know, he had seller's remorse, really, because he sold it to Google, and he created Freebase, which was supposed to be free knowledge base, disappeared. So he's trying to do an underlaying project, and I've been talking with them, and the whole thing is, this is what the underlay people came to the same way, that forget about ontologies. The whole point, and this is his conclusion, this is exactly the way I think, is that essentially all you need to be able to do is context switch and context link flexibly. And the ontology, if you like, is emerging. And so you don't, so all I would love to have a session with you at some point. This is exactly what I having done this round trip between Mindgraph and Mindrive, and also linking in the possibility of text search, and give you the ability to fine grain, say, oh, this is same as. Okay, so and then, because that's all you need. So that manual work that you do, you can replicate that, and in that case, in fact, I will show you this. The whole point of Trayermarks and everything I do, Mindgraph, is that actually identities are human readable names combined with Trayermarks, and that really means that no problem with variations. Because you can basically, through association, creating an association at whatever level of then you have the benefits of permanence. That is because that thanks to the IPFS. So you got permanence. It's like, but instead of assigning GUIDs or generated IDs and stick something to it, you do it the other way around. You have the messy thing, but you can refine it precisely. So I think really just turning it back.
The other face of that's really interesting is that you're absolutely right. So if you have a robust sort of same as mapping in the background, that disambiguates. Another fun thing then becomes how is thinking through the sort of the metadata construction needed, so that if I am okay, so I'm in China and I want to see the names in Chinese names rendered in Chinese, the Chinese version, not the anglicized version. But I want to see, well, I perhaps don't want to, change them for a European name, or that kind of thing, where, wherever I see this dealt with, people say, oh, well, that's a bit difficult. And I'm thinking, it's not actually difficult. It's just boring work. I mean, in other words, you've got to have, you need clear and robust metadata done with care and maintained with care. But it's absolutely not, I don't think, I wouldn't class it as complicated. I just class it as detailed.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that this is the whole idea of Trayermark, the ability to attach arbitrary semantic qualifiers, which you can actually attach whatever processes you want. More to the point, you should be able to evolve it. That's the thing. So you're not logged into. That's the fundamental mistake of the semantic web and everything, is that it is not optimized for changeability.
Okay, so
that really means you end up with something which may be established, but it's a view from nowhere.
Yeah.
instead of having multiplicity of views.
And names are a very, we see them, we may see them as very static, but they are very flexible because you have many names, you change your family name, some get married, some change gender, some change country, or so names changes all the time. But for people who has never changed their name or has an easy English, a name with ASCII characters, it's very easy. But even as a Swede, you see the problems. It's better nowadays, but it's hard for people with accents. Accents are always dropped.
We have to decide on what,
sorry.
we have to decide on what we're trying to define here, because I remember a discussion with a friend who was actually a British lord, and he was very upset at this whole ID thing that come up in many countries. And he said, my name is not who I am. I am Lord so-and-so, but my name is also so-and-so. My wife's name has changed so-and-so. So it's exactly what you're talking about. So I think we need to have two different layers. One layer is identity and another one is name. Because
it's a label. It's a label. But it's,
it could even be a pseudonym, right? Yeah. So I think Jory's point is partly that you put up the name of the person who says that they did this document, but then you may have to convert that to something else to find out who they are or what other documents they have done. It may not be the same thing. But all we're trying to do right now is just to have one name readable for one document. That's the first step, right?
Yeah, but even that, Frode, can be hard. But as we noticed here now, when I try to make clickable author names clickable, so you can automatically find them, because in the papers there may be a list of co-authors, and one of the co-author may be called the third, Adam Verne the third, and then I may put a comma after my family name. But in my system, I immediately thought, I thought authors were separated by comma. So suddenly we have two a person named the third, or I. Yeah, and that is kind of, so in order to annotate and say that something is the same as, we need to first individualize or separate the different authors from each other, make identities, or make three separate things for three different people, and even that can be tricky in some places.
But another aspect that I've been thinking on is, having been through the pain, the useful part, and it really has been a useful thing, and the pain of making this data set, was thinking things. So I'm, for instance, I was surprised, and it's my naivety. Oh, by the way, Cavendish has just won his 34th stage show record, matched Eddie Merckx's record. So sorry if you don't enjoy cycling. But anyway, the thing is that, so when I look at the ACM, the names aren't normalized. So you click through for an author name, and I've found people who have several records, which goes back, it's the somebody else problem. So one of the things I think we keep avoiding, because we have this sort of hubris that somehow the machine will do it for us, is understanding that there is a skill curation task, and one that I don't think the librarian sector, for instance, want to pick up. I mean, I think it's in their skill set area, but they to them it's sort of hidden behind a wall of software. But this process of disambiguating this knowledge and setting those things, because all the clever things we just mentioned rest on the fact that the data is correct.
Okay, let's not go into all kinds of philosophical things, even though that's probably more interesting to someone who may be watching. By the way, we have about 20 views a week on these things, which is really weird. I have no idea who you are. Please identify yourself in the comments. Anyway, how are we? So here's the thing. All we're trying to do is make two people happy now, Mark and Adam, because it's Mark data set going into Adam's code. And if we can solve that problem, then we can specify in Visual Meta, this is how it should be for all time until someone changes it. I think that in itself will be extremely useful, because when we get to the production for hypertext conference proceedings, this is exactly what we have to solve then. So we might as well at least give them our best stab, right, guys? So Adam,
so for a wish list from my part for Visual Meta is that all authors get their own entry. not as a long string that I should try to find out if the comma junior is if junior is a separate person, or if someone has quotes in their name as a like a pirate, or so every person, every author should have their own name, and if they have an identifier that is known, maybe known to them, kind of as similar to the ORCID ID, but we could have a Visual Meta ID that you create it once and you keep it and you attach it to whatever you like. You don't have to, and you can have multiple if you have pseudonyms, or but you can, at least if you want to, you can attach that ID to. So Frode, you get a unique number that is yours, that you fill in Author or any software that can take it, and that is automatically added to all text you're writing. That would be a big win for us going forward. And then we have the other problem of working backwards with historical data and attaching that identifier to historical data. But for Visual Meta, it's forward looking. So we should really get that identifier and get those. Yeah, here it is. So I want, if I could have this in my way and not thinking too much about conforming to a BibTeX style, I would like to have every author in a separate line. And what we would gain from that as well is that we could have a even cleaner syntax where we don't.
Right. If you leave that like that, what you could do is leave the existing thing of author, which BibTeX understands, and you just make the next one author 1, author 2. BibTeX will understand it. It won't know what to do with it. It won't be a code error. So we get the enhancement we want. And I think that's that. You know, in other words, this is the thing. So we work within the meta format that we're using, but we build the effectively enhancements that are work within the system, but don't break anything. And we can certainly do that. In fact, you know, although it's verbose written out, I would probably put, you know, author 1 ID or something, you know, or you probably, I don't think actually, in fairness, I don't think BibTeX does nested structures, but I think if at the moment, we could certainly break out the authors. I don't think it'll break BibTeX, and I think Adam's right. If we have an ID, I'm very happy to have. I need a sort of day or two to sort of not be doing other stuff because I need to be careful. I'm pushing what the Tinbots can do, but I will have a go at author IDs. So
I have to ask questions because my brain is not your size. Okay. What I think we need to do is a couple of things. One is this one is the one that's going to be used by normal BibTeX, right?
Yes.
So I think that should actually be all the names.
Yes.
Author 1, 2, 3 should actually be variations thereof, right? Okay. So I will say and.
Yes.
Right. So that is as normal, but then yeah, Jerry.
Yeah, sorry, you have to go.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that.
See you on Monday. Are you having a session on Monday or?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. See you then. Sorry, I got to go. Yeah.
Bye.
Oh, sorry, everyone. We have a practical issue. It's in the kitchen somewhere. Can you bring in a go in? Right. Sorry about that. Wife and child just returned. Right. I've obviously done this wrong, this highlighted bit. Can you tell me how it should be done so that we can have, if there is an ID? But first of all, I'm sorry, Adam, do you want first name, last name, or last name, comma, first name?
Ideally, if it's for machines mostly, I want them as separate fields, kind of a family name as a separate entry, and all the other names as one. I would think it would be a reasonable.
Okay, well, you can do it sort of two ways in BibTeX. It will do both, but the one that seems more robust is the one that's basically last name. And then depending on the number of commas that follow it before, then the and is the name separator, and the commas after are things like prefixes, suffixes, names, and that which is more flexible and more easily parsable by a machine. So I think the name just written out as full fails because it gives no hint to the machine as to where the name passes. For instance, if it's
Mark,
on somebody, am I sorting on the
you don't need to give why. Just tell me what works. So the normal one would
Yeah.
be this, right? What's highlighted?
Yep.
Sorry, Edgar's here. Hi. Oh my gosh, Edgar, you have to show your unicorn.
Ooh.
Oh,
Yes. You got that. This
That's
was
so
super
cool.
helpful with mommy today.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back. Okay, sorry guys.
Unicorn's always good.
and one question slightly larger than this is if author 1 here should be in this entry at all, or if it should be in a separate kind of more flexible wrapper that supports nestedness and so on, identifies without messing too much about with the BibTeX standard. So we could have a
You mean lower down, like it would
lower
be,
down a visual meta section that that part could also mark up with which section. It could be combined with headings in a way. It could say that this author wrote these pages and so on. So it could be a richer wrapper that is nested.
Yeah, and also that gets us out of the problem about how far we're bending the BibTeX section.
I don't think we should bend it too much. We should have a very standard BibTeX. We know maybe a single field like a document object identifier.
Because I just had, and these things matter in the sense that a change to the tool that I'm using is just resorted. So the type of list that Tinderbox was using is now resorted 1,000 authors from their original publication order into alphabetical order, which does not please me greatly. But it just shows, and it may matter. To somebody who's studying, if we're going to be kind to our future selves, unless and until we decide that nothing bar the first author matters, order does matter.
Hang on. Lot of things. First of all, just want to say that JSON, Jacob suggested we stop using JSON and we use something more custom for us. That's something that you guys need to help decide on. And secondly, if you, Adam, want to have a separate @authors nested thing, all you need to do is write it, email it to me, and we'll put it straight in. As long as, that'll, if it makes sense, we use it. I completely agree that it's probably a good idea to only have this bit here be completely normal.
Yeah.
I'm deleting that now, and I'm not going to save this page for that reason. So I'm just going to, I don't know why it logged me out. How does that impact your workflow? It shouldn't impact it very much, right, Mark?
No, I just need to build some more metadata, and this is the whole point of deliberately working in a flexible structured tool, because for exactly this sort of thing. So I can go and say, okay, now I need to retrofit this thing back and look at the impacts it has. Whereas if I was doing this in something large, which was broadly buttoned down in structure, it'd be more difficult. Out of interest, why is Jacob against JSON?
I don't think he's necessarily against it. He's just saying for the bits that aren't full BibTeX, let's just do what is. I mean, look at him. It's like a girlfriend. He really doesn't reply, and then he does in a jump because he's very focused. So even though he's my programmer and I pay him, the communication is hilarious.
You have 500 unanswered texts. Yes. Where are you?
I mean, it can be frustrating, but I have to admit, it is actually very useful because he properly concentrates and I don't.
Yeah.
So the thing with JSON, I work with it, in my systems and internally, and it's a language of the web, of course. But it's not, the good part about it is that it's everywhere, but it's not no unicorn format.
What?
It's no unicorn format. It's not like your the unicorn we just saw. It's a tree format that happens to map nicely to or is closely married to JavaScript. And but if we want to have something that is easy to write or look at here, we can do that. Because as a programmer, I don't think I have to write custom code anyway. and reading quite simple fields with a key like author colon and a name. It's simple. It's text processing, and in a way, if it's stuck to a PDF, we will get many problems with line breaks and so on anyway.
If it's too long, indeed.
If it's too long, so far we have solved it by making lines very small, but that has its limits. We can't put a whole video into that field encoded in binary. It will break. So we could just as well do our own format here that is quite readable and...
Yeah, Rafael, I see you have your hand up, but yeah, Adam, please feel free for you to write that and test it. By the way, on the binary issue, Christopher Guttridge and I, did a little test, 1 minute of normal HD video encoded in binary, printed on an A4 sheet with a normal small typeface. When you stack them on top of each other, it'd be 1 meter tall. So yeah, Rafael, please.
Yeah, since Adam and Mark are going to be working both on the data set and the visualization, my question is, for the ACM conference, are you going to be presenting Visual Meta, Frode? Is there going to be like a presentation section for you guys?
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. The current plan, and there are things falling together, and I don't want to jinx anything. The current plan is that Vint and I will do a presentation, maybe just 15 minutes of Visual Meta, and we will use the visualizations as an example of what it can do, obviously explaining where that data comes from, that it's manual. It will also do the very basic copy and paste as citation before the sexy visualization. So people will know what it is. And furthermore, Vint will write in an editorial, I think for the November issue of ACM Communications, on what this is. And as Mark was mentioning earlier, Wendy Hall, my main advisor, she has said she would like to look into using Visual Meta for next summer's web ACM, which is significantly larger. So there are more and more opportunities for both evangelism and for learning from people. Mm-hmm. And once we have done the hypertext this year, I think we need to talk to many different publishers and say, look, this is how it works and this is how it's implemented in the real world. And it's very, very exciting.
Okay, because I'm just thinking where I could help out, since Adam is going to be, programming, Mark is going to be fixing the data set, you're going to be presenting. I can either help make visuals, make slides, or I can help either structure the script. I just want to get where I could help you guys out to make a great presentation on it.
I think another interesting area would be to, for instance, for you to look at the same data and say, well, okay, if I wanted to use it as an input to your system, for sake of argument, mm-hmm. is it usable? What are there some affordances that are missing, which is not so much the data itself. Are there more wrappers? Are there more? Because I think a lot of the stuff I've found working with trying to do documentation and knowledge transfer is that often it's the boundary metaphors, because mm-hmm. everyone just assumes everyone turns up at the front gate of their knowledge with the same set of terminology or something. So perhaps, one of the things that we haven't got to yet that we need to think about in the round as a worldwide system is that, okay, we might need a sort of a translation layer in the loosest sense of the word, so that what you call X and I call Y, we know, mm-hmm. This is another form of is also whatever. So that, it might just be an interesting thing to say, could you meaningfully take the sort of data that we've got in the current data set, or is used in, that I've done for Adam's visualizations, and do anything useful as a possible user of your system? I think that would be interesting.
Of course. So we were talking about that on this Wednesday. And then the question is that I can make up the mockups to explain how it would work and the possibilities of it. But since the conference is, in a couple of weeks from now, maybe it's very short. I could only make it as mockups. It wouldn't be a working prototype or anything. So
And
that's why I decided to.
I meant in the sense that, yeah, I mean, mock-ups are great, but also, even if it's just sort of verbal feedback in these conversations about,
Oh, of course.
this, and it's knowing the kind of thing that, yeah, I know what I wanted to do, but I'm just, there's this bit I can't connect, it's not there. So which is why I'm definitely trying to hold this in a very soft pair of hands at the moment. So I don't want to overshape the data, because I don't want to get to the point of saying, to get on the ride, you've got to be this tall. What I learned from the process, saying at this stage, we can put all these things in, and that makes it, today's vernacular, more inclusive. It just makes more ways for people to use it. Because the real joy of this to me is this is something that breaks it out of, you haven't got to be in some privileged place to get this. What's the scale of data?
Very odd. 1 second, sorry.
All sorts of people can use it. So don't at this point, don't spend your time trying to make something, because I'm sure you've got better use of the time. It's really just looking at it, saying it, and without feeling you're being pejorative. Look for the things that are problematic. Put it that way. And we can then think, okay, is this something we can work around, and how do we work around it? And then we have a nice pattern, because that's what I'm really looking for. I'm looking for the reuse patterns that allow us to take this and say, okay, now let's go to something completely different, some other field completely different, and give them a sporting chance of being able to do something similar. Because if they've got to build it from the ground up for themselves, it's going to take a long time, and it's going to need someone to do the same evangelism. And I think that it would be time wasted. So,
because I think, Mark, the examples we have right now with the data set and what Adam is doing are going to be enough for these 15 minutes. And I could help, for example, help sit down with Adam and then try to think up the user experience and what happens if we zoom in, and then create the visual mockups for that, so that Adam can make the code. So
I think that would help.
Trying to enhance what we have.
Yeah, so kick-ass visual demo in terms of not overly creative, but just something that sells the points across, because it's always difficult. You could show something live, and but I know it's never quite like that. Actually, you need to distill it down and say, you need to point people, say, all this stuff is happening, but the bit you really need to keep your eyes on is that bit in the corner. So that's probably, I suspect, where you can sort of deliver the most with your sort of experience in the the presentation side, to just help with that presento for Frode and Vint.
Yeah, I think we need to talk more about that, Rafael, but just to clarify, so Adam, you will write the JSON bit that you would like to have in Visual Meta, right?
Well, what time frame do we have here?
It's not urgent at all.
Okay. I can write some examples of JSON or similar, a data format that I would be happy to receive. But as a programmer, I'm happy to receive data in many forms. It's not that important which. It can be an XML, it can be JSON, it can be a key value list, it can be many things. But I can come up with something that is human readable and human writable.
When it comes to human readable, it isn't that important that it's normal human. If it's a programmer human, that's enough. But if you and Mark can do some emails back and forth and save those emails because it's part of the story, that would be really, really good.
I'm very happy. I'll have a think on giving Adam a sort of GUI, global ID for users, at least within my dataset space, so you can do more with that.
Yeah, because that is kind of what you wished or asked Rafael about. What isn't there, or what should be changed to make it more useful? And for my use case, it was exactly that. That authors should be first class objects in the database. They shouldn't just be names or English names attached to a paper as a string. They should really be things that you probably have in your database, Mark. Yeah, but
yes, yeah.
Yeah, but they should have identifiers. They should have many names listed, so one person can have many names and different names at different periods in their life as well.
I can do that. would you want all that in one single table, or would it be that if I gave you the authors and if I gave you the paper authors with an ID, as I could give you a string that's sort of like the conference published name, you know, blogs et al., but then a separate thing that says the authors are actually these 5 GUIDs in a separate table that probably gave you that unpacking of the different names. Otherwise, I mean, if it's all in one, you know, if you imagine it as like our tidyverse table where you've unpacked everything, it gets quite large quite quickly. And I don't mind at all. I don't think we're at the stage where it's going to break anything. But you tell me, and I can, you know, I can do that as another table perhaps for you.
I would probably be happy if I got a table with the generated IDs for each known author. It could be duplicates, of course, that you, when you're not sure if they are the same person, they could get 2 different IDs, because that's good.
Sorry.
That is a good use case to have a duplicates in it, in that data as well, if you're unsure, because we need a way to match it later on as well. And if I had that table with identifiers and different spellings, I would be happy, because then I could match against that table. So whenever I get a name, I can get the alternative names for that person as well, or I can look up in this table and find the identifiers.
Well, one thing I did pragmatically, because it was just easy in the tool I'm using, was when I did the authors, I just chose one that I tried to get the one that was sort of you know, had as many names that weren't abbreviated, and if it had accents, the ones that had the, you know, their own accents, or, you know, were using a imbis or whatever, and made that the sort of the top one and nested the others because my data structure is an outline. But I'm thinking that's not so clever. What I really want is that I want a canonical name, and then all the variants, including the canonical name and variants of it.
Canonical name, that's the point.
Well, no, it's all changeable after, but what I mean structurally is that we have, so, you know, Frode is ID number 1, and you might say have 3 versions of your name, but they'd all be, even though one of those 3 is taken as being the one that we use generally in display, that all 3 are subversions of it. Because then, for instance, I could have an ID that you know, your name as F.Hegland would be your ID .1, and it just means that the programmer can deconstruct it.
I understand that, but also this is, I think, one of the areas Raphael can contribute to, because this stuff is tricky. So once we have it nailed down to an extent, I think we need much better presentation of this. And
Sure.
not just me and Keynote. I think, you know, with the animations you do specifically, Raphael, you know, like the discussion on, we could almost make it fun how to deal with the names. But kind of philosophically on the naming issue, I think it's really important that we acknowledge that people live and then they die. You know, people don't live forever. And there are many ways you can address people. Like currently, Mark, you are in the lower right-hand corner of my screen, which is not the same as what everyone else has. The addressability issue is, of course, core to what we're dealing with. And I think we have to be mindful of that. So the first thing we have, the most important thing we have is what the authors of the papers chose to mark themselves as.
At that point in time as well.
Well, that's the exact thing I've done. I'm holding the provenance. What I'm really saying, when I probably phrased it poorly, when I said the canonical name would in reality, under the, you know, behind the curtain, would be an identifier ID, and it might be that there's a string of, there is a version of the name that is used by that if we have no other thing, but then that ID might have 5 or 6 different variants which we could programmatically get at.
I'm a little scared at the whole idea of an ID in that sense, because currently we're dealing with one set of data. Most of these people will also have contributed to other conferences and other books and other things in their lives. So what I really, really want to see is some kind of a thing where, you know, author Mark Anderson, and then maybe some division that says also known as. You know, I saw your PhD thesis and you have a middle name. I didn't know that. And now you are Dr. Mark, you know, all the stuff we just discussed.
You know, I get that. I mean,
let me just finish, because what I said is something I know you agree with, right? All I'm saying is if we have a string or whatever it is of this, and this, if it then comes into completely different data sets, none of these are canonical in saying this is who you are. All of them together, maybe even with machine learning, will have to be used and said, do they really, is Mark the person that, it has to match very flexibly.
Well, Adam may be able to, having heard me describe this, will tell me whether I'm talking complete rubbish, but it occurs to me that if the way within our own data set we describe these name variants as some kind of an ID as a data structure, so we have, sort of person 61 may have 7 variants of their name, that we can map. Once we have that, the also known as becomes easier, because in another data set, it can find a match somewhere. And even if the match is to one of the lesser known variants in our data set, it can then find the canonical reference and it can begin to build.
But that assumes that people don't share names, and they do. We don't.
Oh, yeah, sorry, yeah, absolutely.
So we should rather be. We should be a bit hands off, or be very. It should be someone, a person, doing that matching.
Yeah,
or a very safe method for doing that matching, because there are so many Smiths and Wangs around the globe. Yep. So we are lucky that we have unique names, or I guess we have. I don't know about.
Yeah, my name's quite common.
No, you don't have it. So there are probably a few Dr. Mark Andersons around the world.
There are
even doctors. So and you shouldn't be confused, of course.
I think we all agree, as long as we don't use the word canonical, I think we actually agree. Here's a list of names for which so at this point, this is who it is. Because don't forget, in Visual Meta, I'm not talking about the database for a moment, but just in Visual Meta, we are talking about one document, just one, right? But because the references to that are in that document to another document, that other document will have to speak for itself.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the best way that the authors, editors have of stating their identities for this document. That's all we're talking about.
Yeah. Broadly, in an academic sense, it's probably not problematic for people to state their identity. But, if you're maybe you've got co-authors and you're working in an area where, where it doesn't matter which side of the good or bad you're on, but in the sense, if it's problematic, we also need to have a degree of fuzzy, just to live.
Yeah.
And identifying people unambiguously is not always what we want to do.
And maybe we do the first 90%, and then we are humble about the rest of the 10%. But we shouldn't be too strict about the next 10% or the last 10%. It need to be messy and fuzzy and so on. But what I at least think we should do is have international names properly recognized, and also be and recognize that people change names over time.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, those things we can fix.
One of the nicest innovations I've seen in interface design for a long time is Adam's use of tab in the visualization, to have a card up, so to speak, and then tab, and you change to a completely different visualization with the same data. That's absolutely astounding. And I'm jealous that I didn't come up with it. So in the future,
you can have it, because it's already giving me problems. I will show you.
Okay, but just to continue talking about the amazement of that, is when it comes into the name issue, I would love to be, once we can afford to build proper big software systems, be in a data set and says, this Raphael is actually this other Raphael. It's actually the same person. And me as the end user just does that. So what's happening here?
Okay, now I see I have a bug here. Keywords appear in the wrong place here. But here is prototype search interface. I sent it to Frode and Mark, and it's almost that version. I played around with doing a full text search or of title of the paper, author names, conference title, conference year, abstract, and keywords. So if you write something here, Xanadu, then you get all or if you write ACM, you get all but 2 conferences. This wasn't an ACM conference.
That wasn't. Why 2007 isn't, I don't know. It'll be in the conference title, didn't include ACM probably.
Nope. Yeah. So this is a way of. Whoops.
But that's a really nice anti-pattern, actually. Because one of the things I always find myself, when somebody shows me some enormous sort of social network spider diagram, I'm thinking, whoopee, I know all these people talk to one another. What I really want to know is who's not talking to one another that ought to be. It's all, so that's a really nice example of stuff you can pull out.
And having search is incredibly useful, search and highlighting like this. Enter the word social to see when the social, the word social is getting mentioned in abstracts and titles and keywords. And here it's really, not that much in early hypertext. And suddenly here around 2006, social becomes the thing. And here, and here even the conference changed its name to social media conference.
It's nice that you leave up everything else, because then you can see the proportion.
Yeah,
papers that are social is very good.
And well, one thing you're probably not aware, well, there's no reason you should be, but basically about 2006, hypertext went through a near-death experience.
That drop here.
Basically, they had their lunch eaten by the world. All the money went off the World Wide Web, and suddenly hypertext and hypermedia wasn't sexy anymore. So they embraced
that, yeah.
And it's now in a sense. In fact, if you look at the papers, there's probably 1/3 hypertext or less, and most of it is Twitterology and social media, which is keeping it alive. And there probably will be another split. I mean, but again, that's something interesting to someone who is looking at almost the social dynamics of this sort of thing.
Yes.
A futures person would come back, and even if they didn't know, might say this was probably the point where there's a divergence in this knowledge group.
And the interesting thing here is that that information, or that small little speech you just gave us, introduction to what happened here, the history lesson, just having this selection here, things highlighted, and maybe a paragraph written by you would really explain what happened here. So that could be a list or a guide to this data that could be shown in here. If you press social and read that little text, you could get a vague idea of what happened here. Why is social?
So you're talking about saved searches with
saved searches, saved views, and small comments here.
But you bring in another really interesting thing. So, for instance, let's sort of bowl forward in time, and we're past the point where I think this is a useful thing to have this longitudinal view.
Yep.
Something that the conference would take on itself would be really useful is effectively to have almost a historical commentary. So a form of annotation that lives in the data set that isn't perhaps even as direct as an annotated query, but it might, it just something that can insert itself into visualizations for someone using this. Because, for instance, if I worked in a completely different field and I came across this, this might be useful to me. It might be very pertinent to me in a way that I might miss if I didn't know that there'd been that change. So that's an interesting idea, actually, in the way that it's something I've discussed with Dave Millard, who I know is not here, but I think would be really interesting.
I'm supposed to go now, but what I'll do is I will do what I have to do for the family and come back. So
okay. What would be really interesting and something I think if the ACM Hypertext takes this up, one of the things I'm going to suggest is a number of people who are, have good standing in the conference, let's put it like that, would be to go and start actually coding some of these papers in the sort of social science sense. So, okay, this one's about spatial hypertext, so not everything under the sun, not some group of a tag cloud, but a number of very specific themes that are acceptable, so the point of having people who have standing in the thing, so we're not going to have a religious war over this term or that term, but simply so that for this sort of thing, we can do some much more sophisticated searching, because I think what I've learned from this is author keywords are next to useless. 50% of them are nonce, occur just once.
Yeah, what you really need is someone else to make that classification according to their system. It's subjective and for a specific purpose, but
that's why I think it needs to be people with something like a conference. It needs to be people with standing in the conference. I would not wish to. I mean, although I'd happily do it, I'm wary about it because I'd much rather wait 6 months and let people do it from an understood standpoint, so that we don't have an argument about whether this encoding is good. We understand why we're doing it, and we have the argument beforehand, and then let people do it, because that would be, I mean, that's another thing I'd really like to see. But I'd be very wary, because even in this conference, there's a lot of stuff that I really, it's not an area I particularly understand. And therefore I might miss a complete divide between things that to my eyes would look the same, because, for instance, the social media stuff I don't really get, I don't really follow. That's not to mean that I don't value it, and it's just erudition that I don't understand.
Yeah, I was quite surprised seeing that when I searched for social media, that the conference actually changed name to Conference on.
That's why. Yeah, because it's been through a number of name changes. But I mean, its banner name is Hypertext. But social media is sort of keeping it alive. And one of the other things I noticed doing this, you see really interesting things. So the social media papers early on, and even if they're citing anything in conferences, other social media. So you can really see a divergence. I mean, it's almost, at this point, politically, it's probably better not to make that too plain, because, to a certain extent, we don't want to emphasize there's a difference, because if the social media camp all departed elsewhere, there wouldn't be enough to run a Hypertext conference, which would be a real shame, because nobody else is going to take this really interesting area that maps right from the arts through to the sciences, and in a non-pure tech way. There aren't many other things sort of doing this. So I'd be very sad to see it go. And if it means there's some stuff I don't really understand, then I'm not too worried.
But doing search here was very, eye-opening in several ways. But my first naive, for the viewers here, I said this to Mark, or written this to, and my first naive way was just making every word, every author clickable as a first step. I wanted every word clickable in some way, every year, but as a first step, authors were very well defined. So I thought. So clicking on Fred, but clicking on. Let's see if we have someone who's. Here we have Frank M. Shipman, the third, but the third got his. It got its own. Link here because of the.
But the other thing I find interesting about having, the other fun thing of having done this, regardless of whether it was easy or difficult to do, is there's a whole now level of other things we can look at. So, for instance, this idea of word search, how useful is it? So, are we as authors, as contributors into it, which I am in a very small way, actually producing text or metadata that is actually useful in search?
Yes.
My guess is in probably most cases we aren't, because we don't think about it in those terms. We think about someone consuming a whole paper. They might look at the abstract, but very few abstracts are actually very well written. And so there's another sort of learning point, garbage in, garbage out. There's another nice learning point in this that I think carries across. In other words, there's some scholarship that we've done on this to help us all in the round. So how do you go about, if you knew that someone was to use this data in this way, how without trying to game the process, how would it reasonably inform you in writing?
Yeah, it's obvious that the keyword part should be. It could be, at least, really the.
Do you want? I gave you the raw keywords. I haven't done. The trouble is, it's probably, we can do it in slow time. It's probably take me a couple of weeks on and on. It's a slow iterative process to go through. Because I've got to walk the whole set. Mechanization doesn't help you in this, but it would be interesting. What I can do is I can keep the original set and I can keep the other set, just as I've done with the author names. I mean, and I know Dave Millard asks, wouldn't it be useful to know where people work? But you're immediately back in the same thing, because some people use a useful description, others don't, or they might all work for different places but at the same university. Yet at the same time, it will be lovely, for instance, I've seen the neology of King John is my favorite one that I must have probably showed you all, but where there's a timeline you can scrub and you see King John of England who never stayed in one place. And his records show that, he did such and such at the castle of wherever. And through it, and as you scrub the timeline, you see him travel through sort of from Scotland to England down to France and back again. But since you could scrub across the timeline and you could see in a map where the papers are coming from, which points, which places of learning. Fred.
I have comments on that.
Yeah,
that's super interesting and super cool. Just to be philosophical for a moment, the world is messy. Information is messy. There will always be mistakes. I'm very glad that we are acknowledging that. So what we need, if we're going to, when I first met Doug Engelbart in the very first meeting, he told me his philosophy. And of course, I felt mine was the same, just a tiny version of his vast philosophy. And he asked me about my philosophy. And I said, well, trying to do what you're doing, it's called liquid information. I want to make information become more liquid, but not completely liquid, because then it's useless. I'm saying that because what I really feel we're trying to do here is, in this kind of web of stuff, to create holding points to navigate by.
Yes.
So right now we're working on the names, of course, but if someone makes a list of King John or King Anderson's locations, as long as that is from a trusted source for whatever reason, make them talk to each other.
Well, indeed. I mean, and you preach the converted, I think.
I wasn't meaning to talk against what you were saying. I was just trying to highlight how cool it is.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing, which I've sort of noticed, it's sort of squashed between pure humanities and pure computer science in my studies recently, is that each want a different sort of certainty. And that's not where life is. So I definitely embrace the fuzzy bit. In terms of
the fuzziness is part of it, but also I have a real stress. I'm 53 years old, just turned recently, as you know. And for a large part of my life, it's kind of been either in California or with California people, actually in Croatia as well. So let's not be countryist. Talking of saving the world, and the conversation goes like this, and it becomes so big, it becomes nothing. So I'm so glad that right now we're dealing with some points here. And if we want to start, let's say after the summer, actually work on, we even have a timeline, work on a timeline system, maybe make it compatible with the Wikipedia timeline. I don't know. But make that fit in here. So we can say that Adam Wern worked at so-and-so till so-and-so place. And if we can do that, it could, of course, it's not that hard to do a one-off, right? But if we can look at I'm going to use the term visual meta, but an equivalent for time, or an equivalent for location, magical stuff will happen. But let's not forget, the basic visual meta is only what's in a paper.
Well, as all of this stuff is published, and therefore arguably sort of, beyond the normal argument that goes on in Wikipedia, for instance, Wikidata does timelines. So one interesting thing might be to back this onto Wikidata. Which I think is less of a social warfare cauldron than Wikipedia is, which, having spent some time looking at it, sadly, for all it's good, has some very dark corners, just people just not doing useful stuff. But so yes, we could have that bridge, and I think that's useful. The other thing to bear in mind is, if this flies at this stage via the sort of eased into the limelight through hypertext. One of the other things to bear in mind, that another part of SIGWeb, which is the part of ACM that sponsors hypertext, is Chi, which has much greater standing and is very much in the visualization human interaction space. So one of the things we're usefully doing, I think, is hopefully putting something in front of a bunch of people who then, if we're lucky, will run away, and standing on the shoulders of others will take this places that we haven't thought of. But I think one of the things we're doing here is just undoing the logjam, exposing the ambiguities, exposing the certainties, the things that we can treat as certain, and then seeing what we can feasibly do with it, whilst keeping hold of the hypertextual notion and the sort of Engelbart notion of addressability.
Yep. Yeah, Yeah. Raphael, with you, once
Yes.
this coalesces, yeah, we do really need to work on a way to present this in an engaging manner. Also, the whole package of branding and so on. Should we have a midweek meeting next week so we can?
When is the presentation? Do you have the date and the time?
No, not yet, but it will be, I think, one of the first days of September or last of August.
The dates of hypertext, for what they're worth, and just bring that up, are, come on, Dari, where are you? Okay, September. Hypertext is Monday the 30th of August to Thursday the 2nd of
yeah, I see it.
So that's the time frame.
Okay, good. So then, yeah, I'll plan for that, and yeah, I'll totally do a midweek. We can totally have a midweek conversation to start looking at the branding for that and the design and everything.
It'd kind of be cool if you could use be able to use your system too.
Oh, I would love that, and we can see, like, I can make the mock-ups work in it, but it probably won't have, all the functionality of it. I can simulate the functionality, and I think that's going to be enough for a presentation.
But Raphael, if you could actually find something that some of your users would find useful, and find a way to do that, maybe there's something in your world that needs to go into this world or something. That would be
because that way you get some upside for the, since there's you get something useful out of it that plays back into the work you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I totally see visual meta being used on the back of the cards in our system. And that by itself would already be incredible, because then, you could have the data from those cards used in other places. And
remember, that's really nice to hear. But remember, guys, in Visual Meta, in the intro, it says where the Visual Meta came from. Right, so that could be an interesting part of that, of the generator, because sometimes it's generated post-publishing, sometimes in. So when it's at the back of those cards, what does that mean? There's a difference between someone authoring a card and adding Visual Meta to somehow having it copied in. Then
of course,
becomes an interesting aspect.
And I think it also depends on the type of content that you have Visual Meta attached to. What if it's a photo? What's the Visual Meta for that? If it's a PDF, if it's a book, if it's a video, that's what I would explore.
I think the Psychic connection is a little faster than the internet connection, because just as you said that, I was looking at the wall behind you and I'm thinking, how could it work with graphics?
Yes, exactly. So that's the way I see it, and that's the most synergy that I see with the platform.
And that's also relevant for my spatial hypertext. PDFs is only a small part of that system. I show PDFs, and but I need a visual meta or metadata system that is big, that can accept, that can work generally for any kind of resource. So
like EXIF data type thing.
Yes, but preferably externally, so it can be changed after the fact and added to existing resources.
I had a discussion in Germany many years ago. It's one of the hypertext unrelated things, where a professor there was interested in downed World War II fighter planes. And so we had a back and forth, and I said, what you can do with the EXIF data and just image mapping is to draw a block or whatever on an image and make that a link plus information. So, you click on the sky and it'll tell you what the weather was that day, if that's available. Click on the pilot, you get the pilot's information and so on. So to do a, visual meta style for that, I think would be hugely powerful, wonderfully interesting. Very little to do with text, but so what?
Because Adam, what sort of things are you? Is there a sort of particular subject area, as sort of one that normally has to start somewhere in terms of your spatial hypertext that you're interested in exploring?
Not really, but I deeply miss the way of taking things, regular files or things, video, images, audio, podcasts, for example, to really and a video like this to have it, to own it, and annotate it,
Right.
and extract small snippets or small parts from many different things and put them together side by side visually, and work from that as a thinking environment. And that is really what I miss the most in digital right now. I can do it, or not really. I can't do it with my books because I don't want to rip out the pages. But in digital, I can really rip out the pages and put high fidelity things. Or of course, I can copy a book, but it's cumbersome. But for a PDF, what I can do is just rip a page out or a small section out of it and put it there as a good looking thing, and not just the text, but actually as it was printed or as it was produced. And I think that is very valuable.
This has been stressing me for most of my adult life. But the fact that we're working now with data sets and visual meta means that we can actually talk about doing what you're talking about, Adam. And I think that Raphael's system is related, not at all the same, but related. So you guys should be able to share items between you. And the fact that we in this community are accepting that metadata is crucial is really, really nice. So to hear you say that without getting super stressed and angry is really nice. So I look forward to this summer nailing down some of this stuff. And I think that in dialogue with us and the wider community to discuss how to deal with this. I mean, the biggest problem with my PhD is partly how I'm organizing the documents, because Mendeley and EndNote and Zotero, they offend me. It's like living in Windows. I do not want to live in that kind of an environment. And doing it on the Mac desktop where a tag cannot be inside a folder, it'll show you everything in the entire system tag by it, is insane. But when I live in Lightroom with my pictures, I have hundreds of thousands of them, not a problem. So to do what you're saying and take it to the next step and not just copy what was done at places in the 70s, I think it's finally time.
Another thing I find really interesting is that, you know, when Adam did the sort of first timeline, and I know it was based, I showed that sort of cytology thing, and actually the kindest thing that's happened is there are no lines, because one of the things I'm constantly reminded about when I work with sort of like Tinderbox spatial maps is telling people to stop drawing bloody lines when you don't need to, because because you're implying a cultural weight you didn't intend. Just put them further apart, or, you know, cluster them. There are all sorts of other things. Actually, I'm trying to get Mark Benson to, he had a really nice PowerPoint he did, or keynote he did, which was just different ways of clustering and what we immediately take from them. And to me, that's sort of part of the power. And I think what I take from what Adam was just saying is this ability to just put things, to investigate relationships without building a wretched network. And the problem is that most of our tools now have all grown out of, you know, reading the tea leaves of social media, which is innately about connections, but very, you know, already pre-existing connections. What we're interested in, the thing I love in these visualizations, we're looking for the connections that don't yet exist, and we're trying to create them. We're trying to surface them without forcing them.
So yes, absolutely. And I have an idea for our joint product name. I'm going to be pretentious and pretend I can tell you what your product will be. It's going to be called the Augmented Book. And the reason it's going to be called the Augmented Book is the acronym is what?
Tab.
So the idea is based on Adam's tab. So that, you know, Adam can have his entire style. Raphael can build his entire style, but OpenDoc style, they can live together, and your selected items through tab or similar will move into completely different views that even the programmers who built it may have nothing in common. So you can explore, if you want to go into Ted Nelson's zigzag, you can do that if it conforms to the basic metadata rules.
I'm trying to think if I have, I have spare time, laboring myself projects. I'm sort of getting to the point now that I've seen what Adam's done with some data, because I'm no different to anybody else. Certainly, you know, when I begin to see it, I see what I imagine, but it's nice to actually see it manifested. Is to think, okay, well, what would the future of text look? You know, what metadata would I extract from it that would actually be meaningful? So in other words, what we're not trying to do is to create, the danger is if you're not careful, you just created just a different looking table of contents. Bearing in mind, these are very disparate. You know, this is far less narrow in scope than a conference, which is broadly on a comparatively narrow topic. So in other words, you know, is it worth making a visualization like that, or is it so disparate that you might as well just be doing word search? And I don't know the answer, but I'm beginning to guess part of the answer might be making a data set, even if it proves to be completely useless, but we won't know till we try.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of mumbled there and said future of text. And to be honest, this is way bigger than the future of text. The future of text is important because it is important, but also because hardly anyone is doing anything about it. But I really think that visual meta is a thing now. So for us to expand it into other things is entirely appropriate. I don't think it detracts. I think with the imaginations and perspectives we have in this group, we can make things that could be wonderful. I'm afraid I have to go. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Raphael, should we do Wednesday just quickly to put it in the calendar?
Sure, Wednesday sounds like a good day.
Can we do an hour earlier than this?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, good. Put it in. Same thing. So.
And I've got some homework to do for Adam.
Yes, you have homework to do. All right. Well, this is just ridiculously wonderful. Have a relaxing weekend, and I look forward to seeing you guys on Monday, hopefully.
See you, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.